Hello, everyone. Welcome to the IOPA, which is IOs Impacting Academia virtual series overall. So today is going to be a great conversation. We'll be talking about strengthening K-12 systems through IO psychology. So I have some phenomenal panelists. Thank you all for coming today. And a little bit about the academic IO. We are a collective of IO psychologists and academic leaders that are trying to build happier, healthier, and high-functioning academic systems through coaching, leadership development, through awareness building and just for IOs that want to know a little bit more, we are trying to build the collective and also provide the support for not only academic leaders, but IOs in this space too. It can get lonely, so we are here to actually be able to, assist in all ways that we can. So I'm going to hush. You all know me. And if you don't, you'll figure it out later. But I'm going to give space for our panelists to introduce themselves, who they are, what they do, how they cater to K-12 with their expertise as well. So I'm going to start. Cedric, you are off mute, so you can go first.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Cedric Pruitt. I'm currently teaching at a public high school in the Ministry of Education in the United Arab Emirates. Um, Simultaneously, I'm pursuing my PhD in IO psychology, focusing on the assessment and selection processes of Western expat teachers. As far as how we cater to IO or how I cater to K through 12, it's by looking at schools not just as places of learning, but complex cross cultural organizations and things of that nature. My role as a classroom teacher, it is a bit limited, but I try to use IO principles daily to as they say, optimize classroom team dynamics and just things of that nature. And I'm excited to be a part of this panel, and I'll hand it to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Nate, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Yumna. I'm the organizational development consultant at an education consulting firm called Advanced Learning Partnership within Canada. And our company works with school districts across North America. So we work with school districts in America and Canada as well. And my background is in organizational psychology, where I have my master's from St. Mary's University. And my work focuses mainly on helping K 12 school districts strengthen the human side of systemic change. So we focus a lot on the human side of work, and we work a lot on employee well being, leadership development, the overall organizational culture, lots of competency modeling and strategic planning as well. And throughout this process, what I really understand and while working with K 12s is that we really want to understand that education systems are very different than corporate systems and they're highly relational. And that's what I've understood while working with many school districts. And we help school districts create healthier and more sustainable conditions because ultimately the students are the ones who get impacted the most. So we have to improve the systems. And I'm just excited to be here and just looking forward to having a conversation with my colleagues.
Awesome. So my name is Sydney Reachin. I'm an assistant professor of psychology at North Carolina State University. I kind of come at my experience with K-12 systems in a unique way, I think. I was brought on a couple of years ago to work with the National Counterterrorism Center on soft target assessment. So essentially, targets for attacks that might not have a lot of security. So schools fell into that bucket. And from that work, I ended up working more heavily on a project related to creating a risk assessment for K-12 schools to lower their risks against physical hazards, natural hazards, cyber hazards. And through that project, we conducted a lot of interviews with school personnel, faculty, staff, and just learned a lot about some of the challenges that they face and kind of had to think through creatively how to get that all integrated into the system. So kind of coming at it from a different lens. And it's really interesting because I was brought onto this project because of psychometric training that we get in IO psychology. But then I really found that there was a lot of overlap in terms of like leadership and culture and things like that. So happy to contribute in any way I can, but it'll be a little bit unconventional, I think.
I think that's actually perfect in the ways of how we are able to cater to it, because we all come at it at a different lens, and also success is, I would say, for IOs, we try to make an impact in the ways that we can. So for many K-12 leaders, IO psychology may be something new to them. So how would you explain what IO psychology is, and also why should it matter for schools, districts, and education serving organizations overall? Whoever wants to take it first. You know me, very chaotic, but hey, we're gonna make it work.
Well,
I
I
can go.
can, I can. Okay, no, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is something which I get asked a lot when I go in school districts. They often ask me, okay, what do I psychologists do? So I have sort of like practiced my answer, you can say. I've practiced my spiel. So usually when we're working with leaders, we always tell them that IO psychology is just understanding the science of people at work. So what really helps them thrive at work? How do we really build sustainable or healthy systems or cultures? What is contributing to burnout? And how do you really implement change which is sustainable? And what I've understood through my work at ALP is that a lot of times school leaders do not understand that a lot of these challenges are not individual problems, but rather they are systemic or organizational factors which need to be worked on or changed. For example, things like burnout or role overload or communication challenges are often a system challenge as opposed to an individual shortcoming. And this is what we really explain to when we work with K-12 system leaders, that the challenges which they're facing within the system are an indication that there needs to be changes which need to happen within the system for the adults to feel healthy and sustainable at work. And because education systems are so heavily focused on just student outcomes, we often need to understand that the adult systems underneath need to be given a lot of attention and focus. So that's where we come in as IO psychologists, where we help at developing leadership systems, better communication systems, or just creating an organizational change which is SME voice driven. And that's, I think, what helps leaders understand the value which we bring.
Said I know you were going to jump in first, so you go for it.
To be fair, she covered a lot of what I was going to say, especially about the systematic lens. So often in any organization, we fall into places where we're looking at what individual is to blame or what program was to blame, whereas I always look at things from a systematic, sort of situation, and there's always some type of feedback loop. How do we fix that loop and and take the focus off blaming and things of that nature. So I feel like she answered that well. Only thing I would say is just looking at it through the lens of K through 12, and again, like the system standpoint of focusing on not just the students learning, but like how everyone within the organization functions, how they lead, how they organize, things of that nature. Just details related to systems thinking.
Yeah, I think I would build on the same points you guys are making. A lot of the findings that I came across were really these system-wide behaviors that were impacting the things we were looking at. So it wasn't whether schools had the right equipment, it was how the people at the schools were using the equipment and the culture around and the norms around that rather than um, like more minute details, I guess. And so, yeah, just I think just to echo what you guys are saying, it really is interesting to just see how everything kind of impacts everything else at a school. But I will say also from an IO psychology perspective and how it matters to schools, um, I think that IO psychology training just provides, um, again, a lot of psychometric training, which can help in different ways that I'll probably get into a little bit later, but also we do a lot of interdisciplinary work, and I think that really helps the perspectives that we're taking when we're working with schools.
I love those answers. And you know, the one thing that I always try to tell individuals, they're like, I don't want to do additional work because why would we need to do this? We're already stretched and we're already thin. Why is it needed to actually take our time? And I try to really validate individuals when they say that as well, because one, it may feel like, oh, this is additional things, but also if you come in it at with a leveled system and also thinking of it long term, it's really being very preventative of these things that may happen as well. So it's preventative care instead of being reactionary. So I think that that's one of the lenses that we bring into this space, while also being able to evaluate institutions as organizations. And maybe people are like, we're not an organization or we aren't a business. We are here for the students. I'm like, no, no, you can be very student focused. That's what we do. But also, some of the issues that you may be having are at the organizational level. Like, how do you truly support teachers? How do you support staff? So, really helping them understand, these are people systems that you're working with. And this is the way that we can actually co create an environment so all can thrive within. So, I appreciate those answers. So, what should IO psychologists understand before entering K-12 spaces? Because I know I've hit some roadblocks and I hit major walls throughout the time period that I've tried to provide interventions for K-12. So I'm curious what insights you may be having.
I'm happy to start this one if you want. So I think, again, I came in through the lens of trying to build this risk assessment tool. And through all of these interviews, a lot of things that we learned about the things that we would deal with, the challenges we would have to deal with, I think any IO psychologist would also need to understand when entering K-12 spaces. So the first thing, like funding and limited resources, is just like a reality that a lot of schools are gonna deal with. There's tight budgets. They have to make different trade-offs, and so just knowing that on the outset, that resources, including time, not just money, are really limited. I think that is really important. Again, another thing, and sort of related, staffing is stretched really thin. So like for us, we were interested in like who on staff was the point person for security, who is doing rounds, who is watching the doors, who is doing this and that. And there's just not enough people to do everything that we were looking for, like monitor cameras, cover hallways, stuff like that. And so staffing is stretched thin. And so just knowing that, I think in advance is super helpful, at least to just expectation set. And then, yeah, just back to resources, teachers they don't have a lot of time. And so we were looking at things like security training and like different drills, tabletop exercises, and the teachers they don't have the time to do all of that. And so trying to figure out like workarounds and alternatives to fit with those limited resources is going to be important.
I can go next because I resonate with what Sydney said, that yes, resources, time, and staffing are major challenges when you're working with education school districts. And that's common across the North America. I feel like it doesn't matter which part of the continent we are in. So just understanding those challenges, and also what I feel, another thing which I would want to add there would be that we need to understand that education systems are different than corporate systems, where yes, they are organizations, but they, like Sydney mentioned, they have a lot of challenges which traditional corporate settings might not have. So that's why a lot of times we cannot just uh, plug and play. We can't put in the corporate models and drop them into K-12 systems. We actually need to understand that K-12 systems are very relational and community centered and funded by they're often funded usually. So that is why there's a lot of stakeholders which we need to take into account. We need to get involved with students. We need to understand families, how it's going to impact teachers, principals. In Canada, unions are also a big stakeholder group which we have to cater to when we're working with school districts. So all of these complexities which we have to deal with as, and especially in external consulting, when we come in, we have to really show that we have to build our relationship and trust within the school districts, that we're understanding them, and we are not just giving them a one size fits all, but really we're understanding their district challenges, and we're not coming in from the outside to just fix it. Rather, it should be we're helping with them, we're helping them get to the position they would want. And secondly, just one more thing I would want to add there is that a lot of times we use a lot of jargon in our communication as IO psychologists, and that's what K-12 school district leaders or anybody in K-12 is not going to understand. They don't understand what regression is or multi-level modeling is. They won't understand these things. You have to really translate that information into an accessible language, and that also builds that trust and that relationship where they feel that okay, they can really understand the point which you're trying to make. And I feel that that really goes a long way.
Okay. All right. Yeah, great answers so far. To add to those, I would say change in, from my estimation, it does not happen overnight for the best and the worst reasons. On one side, you, in K through 12 especially, you need to provide us a stable system for our young learners to learn and to be able to make mistakes and things of that nature. You need to provide that. Whereas on the other end, it can become a bit bureaucratic when things need to change, policy wise, et cetera, et cetera. There, and again, I'm saying from my role as a teacher, I have my own biases and things of that nature. But I see from my perspective a disconnect between, often between, administrative uh, entities, whether it be the higher levels that are outside of the actual school, whatever that may be in whatever location you're in, versus the actual classroom execution. And again, we're looking at this from a systematic standpoint. We're not like pointing the finger. This person is to blame. That's not how we're trying to address this at all. It's more a focus on, how can we connect within the system, and as my colleague already alluded, that comes with building trust. Trust must be earned, and all sides need to be heard. So,
I think that that was all beautiful. We're looking at it being relational, to evaluating stakeholders, what's going on in the institutions, to also really mitigating a lot of jargon that we have as well. Um, and knowing the art of translation, building that trust as well. Change doesn't happen. People, when you come into academia, you believe it's going to go from a 2 to a 10. And that's just a fallacy. You have to definitely take your time and also understand the context. So I'm like, all these things are beautiful. So my question is, looking at the current state and time too, what are some of the most pressing people, leadership, and organizational challenges K-12 systems are facing right now? I know that there is a shift within professional degrees and what are classified as them as well. What are you seeing, and also how are you like preparing for any shifts that you may be seeing too?
I can speak to this a bit. Um, I am in an international setting. Obviously, I'm from the States, I'm from North America, but from an international setting, from an ESL setting, teaching all over Asia and back home. Um, like there are different layers of culture. Um, as you would look at a multinational corporation, there are different layers of culture. You got the host country, you have the culture of the workers who come in, et cetera, et cetera. I won't bore you with that. But particularly in international and diverse contexts, um, sometimes those cultural clashes they create like poor onboarding and mismatched expectations, and um, that causes what somebody alluded to earlier, turnover, and this situation being a revolving door. And that, and my second point would be, there's an ambiguity in that you're asked as a teacher, again, my perspective, to give, and that is how you show loyalty to the system. Whereas if you don't have um, proper ways to draw boundaries, then um, that might become an issue, and then a systematic issue in that, again, your turnover, revolving door, people leaving just as quick as they're coming. That is one of the most pressing issues, or two of the most pressing issues that I see organizationally right now.
I can go if you want. I again gonna come at this from kind of a weird angle, but um, in this day and age, unfortunately, we see a lot of um, different kinds of threats affecting schools, from obviously school shootings, but there's also really advanced like cybersecurity threats to schools. And so this is a weird perspective, but just in the current climate, these novel threats that are impacting schools um, are just a really interesting lens to think about this through, I guess. And so with this risk assessment, we are essentially trying to tell schools um, for this certain type of hazard, you are this vulnerable, and give them a list of priorities that they should address, different things that they can do to mitigate these threats that they're facing. Um, and we need to give this information to people who might not have the right expertise to make these decisions. So um, it's leaders having to make decisions about what they should spend money on, what types of things are most important in order to fix their safety risk and security risk, but without really having that expertise or a lot of guidance on how to do that, on top of having limited resources. And so one thing that we've really thought about is just like this leadership buy-in to safety has been a really important thing that we've been focusing on, because rather than spending thousands of dollars on like a new metal detector, maybe all your leader needs to do is just not prop a door open and set that standard and that norm for the school. Um, so yeah, I'll go on a tangent about like um, how to make climate the answer to everything, right? But I won't go there yet.
Thank you, folks. I will approach it actually from a slightly different lens, just because I work with many school districts who are very different geographically. But what I see similarity across the school districts are that all of these school districts are being asked to evolve very quickly while operating under significant challenges or changes, especially like education. K-12 education system has changed so much. It's gotten so complex and diverse. And that's, I think, the main issue which a lot of districts are changing, facing. For example, where I feel that the biggest is AI. We cannot shy away from it. Like, there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of potential of AI in education, but there's also a lot of uncertainty where districts are asking, how do we use AI ethically and responsibly, or how do we use AI for student learning or AI literacy? Maybe a lot of districts are also asking for policies or guidelines regarding AI use, or how to integrate AI within the school system without losing that human connection or that creativity. So what we're doing is that we're working with a lot of school districts on Gen AI strategic implementation planning, where we're actually creating mini strategic plans on how to integrate AI within their different departments within their school system. So how will AI impact student outcomes? How will AI impact systemic outcomes? How will it impact staff? And how will it impact community? So these four stakeholders, we are actually creating strategic plans so that these schools have some sort of guidelines or policies to go off of when they're creating or working with AI, because we cannot shy away from it. Students are using it. The quicker school systems and K-12 systems adapt to that reality, I think the better it's going to be for overall the K-12 education system. So this is one challenge which I hear a lot. Like, I've been to a lot of conferences in the past 2 years, and everybody, all school districts are just navigating this new tech which is coming at us repeatedly day on day.
I love it. Y'all all had like some diverse perspectives on this as well. Something that I truly want to like bridge a little bit is moving from like the symptoms to the root as well. Because as we see, a lot of people are trying to navigate in the way that they know. And even when working with clients, I'm like, sometimes I have to say, people don't know what they don't know, right? And we are still trying to navigate with helping leaders understand there are some nuances within this. Sometimes it won't be the perfect response. Sometimes you definitely need to think things through. So for me, I have another question. What does effective interventions look like when time of, I would say, when looking at time, funding, staffing, and urgency are real constraints? How can IOs really position their skills in the way to make it make sense to K-12 leaders?
I think so for us, one thing that we've been focusing on is high leverage, no cost or low cost. So like things that can really improve security or safety, but that don't cost anything, right? Like I'm going to bring up the example again, like the principal not propping doors um open, where it's like you don't, just knowing you don't always have to spend a lot of money to get the outcome you're looking for. So we really have been trying to highlight those for stakeholders. And one thing that stuck with me with these interviews is just learning how different every school is. Like it's not going to be a one size fits all approach at every single school. Um, there are private schools with more resources. There are charter schools just out in the middle of the woods. We interviewed a principal from without any security or fences or anything. And school in that same town that was public school had a lot different security than that other school in the same exact town. So there's not a one size fits all. Schools are all kind of able to do different things. But one thing that one of the people said that we interviewed was what's reasonable for that school. Maybe in a school where there was a attack, given the school's resources, it makes sense that they didn't have a certain mitigation plan in place. But if they can spend money on a fancy coffee machine, then maybe it's more reasonable that they spend money on new locks or something like that. So what's reasonable for one school isn't going to be reasonable for um, every single school. And they really are just so different. So I guess in terms of what effective intervention looks like, first of all, low cost, no cost is great, obviously. Second of all, just something that is tailored to the school that you're working with.
Yeah, I will agree to that. Tailored to the school piece, I really resonate with what you said there, Sydney. So I think that the way we approach external consulting as IO psychologists is that we really need to understand that our interventions need to be realistic, sustainable, and grounded in the reality or the challenges of these systems. We can't come in from a lens thinking that they have unlimited amount of time, money, or resources to dedicate to us, right? So, a lot of times when we're working with these school districts, we don't want to make it seem like we're adding another initiative when they're already over initiative, like when they've already been so many initiatives which have not landed anywhere. So we really need to become part of their system, where a lot of times the solutions or the interventions we are doing are highly practical or oriented directly to their work. So for example, when we want to work with these special education directors with in Texas, so they were struggling with their meeting perceptions, and they did not have a competency model to go off with. So what we created was that with SME voice driven, it was a very SME voice driven process where we created the competency model. But now the challenge was that they didn't have time to practice that model itself or to use that model in their real life. So what we did was that instead of making it a separate alone document, which would live in a Google Drive and not be used, we actually made it part of their practice, where we created coaching sessions where they were using that model into the projects which they were already working on within their school. So within their jobs, they might have some projects, like for example, for guidelines, for AI guidelines, or for new policies regarding funding. So we created those coaching sessions where they were working with other special education directors on the competencies which they want to focus on, which are related to actually their work. So we created a connection with the model and their work. So that actually became an initiative which is helping them work better rather than as an extra step added to their work rather. So you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is that become part of their system rather than trying to come off from an outside lens and saying, oh, you have to do this, this, and this.
Okay. Right. I definitely would agree with both of them as far as the systematic standpoint and, just looking at, like the original premise, tight constraints. Um, I think all I will add is just, just controlling what you can or, intervening and saying that you have to control what you can with the resources that you have, even if that means streamlining communication systems and um, just showing respect in different ways and reframing feedback, just a few different examples like that. Also, managing expectations. What should be a clear expectation? What should be a clear benchmark for things moving forward? So, just a little polish on what they just said, but they covered it all. Great answers.
I have to agree. Even when looking at, thank you for adding that in, because expectation management and also not the one size fits all, low cost to no cost as well. And this is different perspectives of internal and external, and also what's realistic, understandable, and sustainable as well. I think that all these are great insights to make sure that we are being highly practical, and also trying to make sure that we're not just giving the interventions because of course, we know how to do a social network analysis. Now, for IOs, we know exactly what that is. It's popular. We've done it a lot, especially in your program. But even to convey like the realistic aspects of what does this mean to the clients, because they'd be like, okay, cool, you're doing an assessment, yay. And it's really about making sure that we are translating this overall. Rohan had brought up sometimes the lack of policy, which is what he has seen as well. So even with looking at how do we convey it in order to like really impact the work, because I know there are a lot of leaders that say, hey, we don't know what we don't know and we can't deal with it until it happens, right? So I think that that's some foresight that we bring in with understanding organizations of saying these are some of the common things that you need to definitely focus on. Communication is key. I always try to demystify it because I'm like, you should know for us role clarity, right? How are people going to be expected to fulfill the role? Where can they grow? How can they have the resources as well? So I'm loving all these tips. So for us as we think about resources and also how we provide it. Now, the realistic aspect of this is people may not have the funds to have an, I would say, external consultant to come in, right? Or to like guide them in that work. So, when looking at it, like, what advice would you give to principals, district leaders, school counselors, HR leaders, school boards, or educational organizations that may want to strengthen their people systems but may not have the resources to do it? I know, and these are, you know me, I love to ideate too, so I'm excited for this one. Go ahead, Sydney.
I'd say one thing is to think outside the box. um, because again, you have to get around the limited staffing, limited time, limited resources. And so there's a lot of schools that we talk to have so many different community partnerships that they really focus on to help them with a lot of the things that they don't have time to do. Um, and so thinking about different community partnerships that your school can have, um, and just knowing that as a leader in a school system, you need to respect people's time, and practice what you preach, right? If you say, don't keep complacent, don't prop the doors, don't do those things, signal that safety is important, or signal whatever you want to be seen as important, right? Um, and yeah, yeah, I guess that's what I would say. But community relationships, I think, are really important to, and I think there's just a lot of resources that people don't know exist. So yeah, just thinking outside the box and um, make do with what you have the best that you can.
I can go next. So I think the biggest factor would be for me would be just making leaders understand, and this would be I'm referring to workplace well-being work, because we've been doing a lot of burnout intervention. Just because after COVID, overall, like frontline nurses and teachers have been just severely burnt out. So we've gotten a lot of work on workplace well-being, especially in Canada. So what we do is that when we're talking about workplace well-being, we often make sure that the leaders understand that it's not an individual responsibility, but rather it's a systemic issue which we're working towards. And when what we see is that many leaders genuinely want to support staff, but they're not aware of how the systemic factors might be causing those issues. So the healthiest district which we've worked with are not the ones who don't have challenges. Every K-12 system has challenges, but the districts which we work with often are very open to just listening deeply. No, they don't shy away from looking at the data or looking at the issues within their system. They are also open to involving the people, so that the people also have a voice in the project, and that really gets a buy-in from the staff. It's not a top-down project, but rather it's a project which is happening collaboratively within the system. And this, I think, builds collaboration and capacity within the staff as well. And eventually what happens is that well-being then, rather than becoming an individual factor, is actually a systemic issue which the entire system is working with together. And I think that's one thing which I really want leaders to take away, that if your staff is feeling burnt out, don't tell them to go and start doing more yoga or taking more exercise or taking more breaks. Rather, I would suggest taking a deeper insight into their system, what systemic factors might be causing that in the first place.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Again, great answers. Only thing I would add, and again, just a little polish, I'd say to strengthen things. I think sometimes we need to reframe feedback, reframe, I guess mistakes as something that or blame as something that we're moving forward. We're looking at it as systematically as something that needs to change. Sometimes people take, you know, something, even an initiative not working, as, so who is to blame? Whose idea was this anyway? If we could just reframe that into, like, this is us. This is a learning institution, from top to bottom. K through 12 learning institution. So we have to keep moving forward with that philosophy and mandate from top to bottom that we're all continually learning. Um, and I would say, lastly, it's just a small thing, but just making assertive communication a norm rather than aggressive or passive aggressive. Because I mean, you look at the profile of different people working in educational spaces, and these are bleeding hearts. These are people that don't want to offend. These are people who might fall into those types of um, viewpoints, but we have to draw clear boundaries. We have to eliminate this feedback. I mean, not feedback. This this burnout. I'm sorry, y'all. This burnout by drawing our lines in the sand and saying, you know what, this is what I'm willing to do. Yes, of course I care, but I have to take care of myself as well, and that goes every level. Um, what the administrators can do, what the teachers can do, what the students can do. All these things of that nature. So again, thank you for your answers because that helped inform my answer.
My goodness, so many great conversations are happening right now, especially within, let's just call it out as well. I was doing some data pulling, and 64 to 78% of change management initiatives fail within academic spaces. So let's go ahead and just name that because it's very true. It's a bureaucratic space. Top down approach doesn't work at all. It has to be a collaboration. And another like piece that I always tell people is looking at the science behind the workplace too. Close communication bias happens almost every day. I give the examples on working with leaders. I'm like, when you're back home with your parents and you're just trying to hear them and you be like, I know exactly what they're going to say. So why would I even listen? Subconsciously, you're like, yes, I hear you. But that happens every day with leaders. They're like, okay, I know the issues. I know what's happening. So this is our plan. This is how we're going to do this. Um, and people are screaming saying, "Oh, I'm burnt out. I know exactly you're trying to throw something else at us and we don't have the capacity. We're already working full time and also trying to really be strategic with our time now." So I always try to preface leaders and just say, "Hey, like evaluate what's happening right now and also be realistic of saying, you know what, hey, you know what, with this professional development day, let's take out some time to really focus on what may be needed instead of just throwing out new things as well." So now this is the free part of it. So I'm going to let you all guide the conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation that we weren't able to talk about today? Um, from your experiences to what you're seeing to what are some current needs as well? I know, and that's a hard one. That was a question that wasn't brought up beforehand. Sorry.
I think I would say just one thing is that with just all of the funding challenges which school districts are facing, we need to, as psychologists, we really need to think about very clearly of the outcomes, and we need to use data. Like we need throughout the long term projects. Like a lot of times when we're doing when we're working with school districts, oftentimes those projects are year or 2 years or 3 years. So we need to have data to firstly capture insights into baseline, and then whatever strategies or whatever interventions we're implementing within the district, we need to be measuring it. We need to be accountable for ourselves. We need to be tracking that intervention and capturing the data at midpoint and then endpoint to see really if our interventions are not working, and if they're not, then we need to adapt and change as well. Like we need to be very quick on our feet, be very adaptable to the systemic challenges. And if we feel that our interventions are not working, then we shouldn't shy away from accepting that, and rather suggesting another intervention. Because at the end of the day, all of these systems are extremely complex and diverse. And like I said at the start of this conversation, that one size fits all cannot work. And we have to really understand the challenges of the district. And how do we do that? Through evidence. And our evidence is our data, which we capture, and we really need to hold that strongly.
Cedric, I saw that you popped off mute. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, I'm gonna again a little bit of bias here because it's partially what I'm working on in my studies, but um, I think one thing that would help would be to focus on the selection and the onboarding processes in the beginning, um, just to help inform expectations and things all through the system. Like what are these people walking into from each level? What are these people walking into? Communicate those things clearly so that we won't have on the opposite end the the revolving door, so to speak. Um, and as my colleague already alluded to, like the respect of the data, like make sure that the all this testing that we do in these schools, make sure it's valid and reliable. Make sure we're actually doing, a real, test retest situation. Like if I have to give a diagnostic first week of school, we shouldn't be talking about giving that first diagnostic second term. Like we need to properly measure these things in order to get the real results, um, instead of covering things up with bureaucracy and games. So that's my stance.
I don't know if I have too much to add. I know there's one thing that stood out from one of our interviews, and it was, I know Cedric just he mentioned staffing, right, and onboarding. One of our interviewees mentioned you got to pick the team, and we were talking about behavioral threat assessment and management teams at this point. It was pick the team based on who cares, not who necessarily has the most expertise. So I just thought that was an interesting take. Obviously, you need the right people on the team with that expertise. But if you have people who care, this goes for teams of staff, leaders, then they're going to be able to make change easier than other people who don't care, right?
I love that too. Especially thinking about like meaningful work and how you allow people to really emphasize their expertise and also what they care about too, and hearing that out too. I think that's really good. I know some IOs that are like, I want to provide interventions in this space, but my role won't allow me to. They see me as this, and they won't allow me to do this. So that'll be one of the questions that I'll follow up using data, fresh data at that, because we know how data can become stale by just a little shift in the environment. Context really matters because you're like, oh, this is the initiative. And then a policy comes down the way. And then now that whole initiative is scratched because they're like, okay, we can't even focus on this, right? So really collecting that throughout the way. And again, people systems. They are truly important. When I hear a leader saying, oh, well, I'm having this one issue, I'm like, you can tie it to the people systems that you have. Many people think, oh, that's HR within that conversation of onboarding, of selection, of I would say performance management. They're like, these are just some of the things we have to do because HR makes us have to do it. But for us, it's like, how do you onboard someone into your organization? How do they know what they're going to be doing? How do they know success? How do you evaluate that over the time, especially when things shift? Performance management isn't just that one time of the year. It's more of the conversations throughout the time period, quarterly, monthly, of saying, hey, you know what? We did say that was the goal, but it's shifting. What do we have? Who do we have? What's needed? How do you do this? And we can train leaders that it's not HR, but it's every leader's responsibility to make sure that they're able to enhance and engage everyone around them, right? While also knowing we all impact the employee experience. It's those one-to-one interactions. It's all those things that really make into how people feel like they can thrive within the work. So y'all are absolutely amazing. Now, for people that possibly don't aren't in the position to make changes in their K-12 space, what are some tips that you may know, or some of the things that they can start to do to like really build that influence? Or what are some tips that you may have in order to like really utilize their degree and validate saying, hey, I want to practice in these ways? So
I'm not sure if this directly answers your question, but it inspired another thought that I will just share really quick. I would say challenge your own assumptions. One of the focus groups we did, there was this really interesting group of participants who really focused on training takes time. We don't always have time, but we would rather be trained on what to do and know what to do than not know what to do. Because without that training, people kind of freeze in these new situations rather than act in ways that they're supposed to act. This was a security training that we were talking about, but it was like these teachers were scared to react in certain situations because they didn't want to get in trouble because they weren't trained to do it the right way. So you might assume that teachers don't want to spend this time doing trainings, but I'm sure there are certain trainings that teachers will value over others and that they will be more willing to use some of that time that they have set aside. So I guess just challenging your assumptions, not guessing what teachers want and actually asking them, right? We're talking about data a lot. So actually asking teachers what will help them do their jobs better.
I think I would just add to there would be that one of the biggest challenge what I feel the students don't understand is that IO is very, very diverse, and IO psychology can be applied in many different settings, and it can be applied in healthcare, it can be applied in traditional corporate, it can be applied in education systems, government systems. So the fact that when what we study, we bring in a lot of knowledge which is applicable in many different industries, and we need to just really be open minded. So like, because even in my career, I've worked in psychometrics, I've worked in selection and assessment, I've worked in internal and external consulting, so lots of different pathways which we can take as IO psychology students. And what I would want to say is that just pay a lot of attention on relationship building and facilitation. Consulting, what I've understood, is mostly about how well you can communicate and the relationship that you build with your clients or your partners, and that the ability to just listen to people, to understand their challenges, to communicate clearly and build that trust goes a really, really long way. And I know I've been rambling about this a lot throughout this, but really this makes or breaks relationship. Like, once you have that trust and relationship, then you can implement your projects or your strategies. So just be more open minded, be open to all of the opportunities which this degree provides you, and then take it away with your communication skills.
All right. Um, I don't have that much to add. All I would say is um, within K through 12 organizations, someone new coming in, it's difficult because of time constraints and things of that nature. But try to my suggestion would be to try to keep in mind there's a lot of action, but on the bottom of that loop there has to be some reflection, and to keep that a main thing in your policies and your lesson plans or whatever have you moving forward. And again, you need time to do that. You need time to purposely reflect, but you need it. Lastly, I would say anecdotally, as long as there is a workplace, there will be need for IO. So um, that's all I have.
thank you all for the insight that you have brought today. If there's anyone that wants to get connected to you all, please feel free, as long as that's okay with you all. We'll be following up with some of the notes from today and also trying to make sure that we're building that community for not only IOs, but academic leaders that want to see the change happening too. So for this summer, be on the lookout. We'll actually be having focus groups. We'll actually have some engaging conversations with academic leaders and IOs as well. And what are some of the shifts that may be happening, what's needed. So be on the lookout on the business page and also in your email too of what we have yet to come. And if you're looking for a community to be able to talk to like-minded individuals, feel free to hop on the website. The other side. QR code is this way. So we're always happy to be here and also facilitate the conversations that are truly needed to really create these happy, healthy, and high functioning environments. We know there are a lot of people that suffer, and our goal is to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to build the community to make a difference. So, thank you all. Is there anything that you all, the projects that y'all may be having that people should know about as well? And if not, I'll be praying for y'all to get through this summer because I know there's a lot of things happening.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, folks.
All right, y'all. Y'all take care. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.